Tell you this is crazy. I've been working on this thing all day, probably like the last 2 hours. Had to cancel the interview with someone because the connection just failed, and it's embarrassing. Um, because after a while, it makes it look like you don't know what you're doing. And granted, I've done several shows and interviews and stuff like that. The internet failed me today. It just failed me. Let me see if this will work. See, it's not even showing me live right now. It's crazy. But I'm trying to get to go live. It's not going live. I talked to the guest that I had that was going to be on the show, and her software it went down too. So mission failed. Mission failed. Um, and it ain't like one of those where you can abort the mission. Like I said, it's embarrassing. I've done a lot of shows, but tonight we were supposed to do one. I was excited about it, and boom, the internet failed, and it kept failing. It wasn't like it failed one time; it kept failing. It's failing me now. Like I'm trying to get on Instagram, and it's still failing. Like sometimes I feel like things happen when it don't want you to succeed. So that's why I just got on here and was like, mission failed. Connections, when connections don't work, because I want to know, like, you know, what happens when you got connections that you think are gonna work and it don't pan out that way. Because the internet is just an example of how life is. The internet, it not connecting at certain times, but connecting at other times is just an example of how life goes. You can have connections with people. You can think that with you connecting with them, that it's going to make and help you succeed or help them succeed, or y'all going to have this great relationship. And that connection can fail. It might not be, that connect might not be what you need to succeed. So it's just a true example of how things fail, even when you think that there's no way that it couldn't. How much do we rely on the internet? And how much does the internet fail? Be in a meeting, it'll fail. Be on your phone, you'll lose connection. So many different ways. Wi-Fi goes down, Bluetooth, all that. And it's like, it's funny with me, either it's something like this where it just disconnects, or it's where it's continuing to load. So it takes forever and ever and ever. And it just defeats the purpose of you using it. And, since we didn't got so connected and we rely so much on this, when it fails us, like I said, it feels embarrassing to a person. So yeah, what do you do when the mission failed due to the connections? The connect that you thought that you needed in order to succeed fails you. What do you do about that? I've been in several situations where I was like, yeah, once I get this connection or this connect, I'm most definitely going to be able to do this, that, and the other. And it didn't work. Never, or it'd be like, you realize once you got that connection, you actually need it in order to succeed. It wasn't that you thought you needed, that was actually the connect, or you get the connect and you're networking and you're not seeing eye to eye like you thought you was when you got this connection. All of those are failures. You try to connect with someone and it doesn't work out, so you got to go another route. Either that person failed you, or you probably just didn't need that connection. I wouldn't say you failed yourself, because you were only assuming that you needed that connection. But we rely on sometimes those resources and connections for us to succeed. And we don't really have to. And I honestly think that that's a higher power telling us that you don't need that connection. You know what I'm saying? I think that we think when we're not as successful that we might need that boost from a connection. In this case, I most definitely need that boost in a connection to get my guests on here and for us to do this interview. But in life and business and stuff like that, we think that we need the boost or the connect. We really don't need it. Just don't. You figure out later, like, wow, I really didn't even need that. I didn't need that person. I could have did it on my own, or I could have went another route and got another connection. So yeah, it's crazy how things come to you while you're doing things, and it's just like, in this situation, like I said, we rely so much on the internet, and then when it fails us, sometimes it's just an embarrassment. I had this interview set up. I had to call the guests and explain to them why my sources wasn't working, why my connection wasn't working. And, it's just embarrassing. And even though people understand, it's embarrassing. Here's the crazy thing, explaining that and like, that's what we do in life. We have to explain why we use the connection to try to succeed or become successful. So you go out here and you like, I busted my ass to link up with so and so just to find out that I really didn't need that person. So now, not only are you embarrassed, but it's like, it's a smack in the face to you. I went out here and I been breaking my neck trying to get this, this hustle, whatever, and come to find out I didn't even need it. Dressed up, thought I was going to do big things with this person. Come to find out they were only going to use me. How many times have we faced that? How many times have you go out and do something and think that this is finally it for you? You finally got this, you finally in the room with this connect, and you find out, like, I wasted my time. I didn't need to do that. Like, why would I even do that to myself? That's what we go through in life, and I honestly think that's our test. That's our maker telling us, like, yeah, see, told you you need it. As much as you thought you needed it, you didn't need it. It's crazy because we've all been there. I've been in rooms with people and been on phone calls with people and Zoom meetings and all that. And then when you get off the phone, you're like, man, why did I do that? That was dumb. You're asking yourself, why did you do this? Stupid. We hard critics on ourselves, but at the end of the day, it also teaches us a lot. It teaches us that you really don't be needing a whole bunch of what you think you need. I talked to a friend the other day, and I was like, it's funny how when you first start something, let's just think about when you first start up a company or something like that, and you kind of got it in order, like, all right, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna reach out to this person, I'm gonna reach out to that person, and I'm gonna send them this fancy, nice, neat letterhead with blah 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 on it and make it look real professional, because I know they don't be playing no games or blah, 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 blah. And then, as much as 110% effort you put into that communication line, you realize that you get like 2 words, 3 words back, and then you feel disrespected. If you haven't been there before, trust and believe you will one day. One day you will go out and you will put everything into something just to get disrespected, and it's not a good feeling. And I would say 75% of people have experienced it. People that had everything, all their eggs in order and all their ducks in a row, they have experienced that one time where you're like, all right, I'm gonna go out here, I'm gonna dress up, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna walk in there and I'm gonna impress these people because this is where I need to be in order to get where I need to go. And you walk in there and you find out, as soon as you sit down, like, this ain't where I need to be, and these ain't the people that I need to be around. Story for me was when I started my label back in 2000, the first label that I started, we thought we had all our ducks in a row and things in order. We went and had a meeting downtown, Kansas City, Westport area with some executives that were gonna market our project. And as soon as we got in there, and I made sure that we rehearsed this meeting. So it wasn't like, what I'm saying, we just walked in there off the street. Nah, we sat down, my whole entire label. We would have meetings monthly, get together. We rehearse either performances or we rehearse meetings or whatever. So I made sure that everybody was on one accord. And basically, when we walked in, introduced ourselves, sat down, showed them the product. One of the guys threw it in the trash. And he basically went line for line about why we were unprofessional, we wasn't ready, this, that, and the other. It was, I think, 12 or 14 songs on that CD. And he had a reason for every song, a negative reason. Why this didn't, everything from the album cover to the mixing, the mastering, to the marketing that we had already did, to the performances that we had already did, to the mixtape that we was on already out of New York. I mean, he had a negative view on everything. And it's funny because we had positive views on everything. We was getting good feedback from not only the city, but we was getting good feedback from like the country. We had that album in every store, like locally. And then not only that, we had Best Buy, FYE, Street Side Records. We had Hastings out in rural parts of Missouri, places in Omaha, Nebraska, and so on. So we thought we were doing our thing. But this guy, like I said, him and his partners, they ripped us up and down. And when we walked out of that meeting, it taught us two things. It taught us, one, that we need to expect that. We need to expect that things ain't always going to go the way we think they're going to go just because we are prepared and we're in the room with these quote unquote connections. Second thing we learned was that some of them things that person said was right. Everything that they said wasn't wrong. Some of the things were right. And we agreed on it. And we was like, all right, so lesson learned. But to go back to that story, we knew within the first 5 minutes that we shouldn't have been in that room with them because either way, we got disrespected. There's a way that you can talk and discuss things with people without ripping them up and down. There's a way to critique things without making people feel, like they ain't ready or maybe this ain't for them. It was actually, it was most definitely for us, but it's the way that you talk to a person and they didn't do it the right way. So the moral of the story is, every connection is a good connection. It's just not. It might not be the connection that you need or want. You want it, but it's most definitely not the connection that you need. This internet, though, this is a connection I need because otherwise y'all wouldn't even be hearing this. And the funny thing is that when I first started doing a radio show podcast, it was out of a station. And shout out to them. But basically, we did it for a while until COVID hit. And then when COVID hit and a lot of things happened, I go back to that station. I didn't really know what I was going to do. So I just kind of went back to the drawing boards. But, one thing about connections and having them is that people teach you, you really don't have to be in an actual studio with an actual studio audience to do a show. And that's what once I started reading and talking to people, I was like, man, do stuff. And it's funny because the audience grew bigger out of my house than it had ever grown at the show. When I was having people come in and I had interviewed a couple of people from the show, while I was at the show, virtually, but it still wasn't the same. I wasn't getting that many people that was tuning in. But as soon as I started doing it online, yeah, it was crazy. And I'll be honest, like I was kind of discouraged at first because I had never done this type of stuff online, and we had a couple technical difficulties in the very beginning. So I was like, do I really need to be doing this? And it was even to the point where I had this really super dope interview with this producer, award-winning producer that I'm really good friends with. We did an hour-long interview, laughing, joking. I mean, I played a couple of reels with his stuff. He got all these people that he didn't produce songs for and engineers and all that stuff. And tell me why that thing didn't even record. Like it never people were able to see it. Another interview was with one of my cousins who's a comedian out of LA that did a stand up with a lot of cool people. We did an hour-long interview. That was another one that, due to technical difficulty, it didn't record. So we were talking everything else, and I'm thinking that it's on all platforms, blah, 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 da, da, da. So I don't know if it was meant for us to do it that day or what. We'll most definitely be doing it in the future. But like I said, sometimes these connections ain't what you think they are, and you just gotta be kind of like, you gotta have different styles and you gotta think outside the box. Because, and I'll just say this. Some people think that the only way that they can find an audience is online. But you got to remember, I know I came from the days where there was no online and you had to go out, grind, and find people. And I just don't think that people understand that. Like, the reason that I even got as big as I am, and I wouldn't say I'm big, but the fans and followers that I have was because of the grind that I did back in the early 2000s. It had nothing to do with when I came back and started getting back in this in 2020. It was as a group and some of my close friends at the time that helped me. I got because I was grinding. I was always out. They couldn't stop seeing us flyers, and we were performing and all that other stuff. Like every time we was on radio shows, we was doing magazines, stuff like that. Well, you don't get that where just sitting on your couch and on your phone, especially back then. Back then, you had to get up. Luckily, I had some cool mentors that was old school that had been doing music way longer than me. That like, hey, don't expect people to just give you something. You got to go out and get it. I had plenty of people that told me that, and it took me like a while to really realize what they were saying, because at first I was just like, yeah, whatever, and I'm not trying to hear that. I'm trying to come on with you. I mean, you get shut down until finally you like, you know what, maybe I'll take some advice that I've been given thousands of times before and start using it. Because I admit, I was like every other artist trying to get a deal, quote unquote, and with a major label first. And then I started working with a lot of independents that I was trying to get signed with. And everybody was saying the same thing. And they were telling me the truth. It was just that I wasn't listening. They were telling me that, why would you sit and wait, behind me when you can be out here doing it yourself? It was like, because my focus is me. That's what, like, they were hard. So why would you wait for me to give you permission to do something when you could just do it yourself? And it took years. And that was a studio song for me. Because that's who it was. But he was like, you got for everything and go out and get it yourself. I mean, I was early 20s. I'm like, man, it just don't look like everybody else is doing that. Well, but it was exactly what they was doing. Tech Nines and Rich the Factors and my cousin Greedy and the Popper and the list goes on and on. Mr. Stinky, all of them, the Kansas City local rap hustle, the Veteran Clicks, the Miles, Lee Joe, all of them. The list goes on and on and on. But I kind of took them, all of them, because I seen them everywhere. See people at the studio and hanging out with them and, riding with them, doing shows with them. All of them had their own hustle. And all of them were successful at it in their own way, to this day, successful at it in their own way. My cousin Greedy got restaurants and ice cream and all that other stuff. Tex doing his thing, been doing this thing for several decades. The Popper is a clothing designer now, and he's still doing his thing. Rich the Factor is one of the GOATs. He's doing his thing. Everybody contributes, but at the end of the day, they are music all over, and that was way before you could ever post anything or do an ad or any of that other stuff that you can do. If you went to liquor stores, if you went to the mall, if you went to CD stores, parties, clubs, anything like that, you seen their flyers. You might run into them and they might hit fly. I remember the Joker and Mac James back in the day. You could call them and they would come and bring you a CD. Like literally, you'd be like, "I'm gonna buy a CD." They'd be like, "All right, give me your number, man." So that I sat back and he told me, he said, "Yeah, I already heard this advice from my cousin Greedy. I already heard this from several producers in town. When you just sitting in on studio sessions with people and stuff like that, and like my little cousin Scario Andretti, and doing stuff. He was hustling out here. He was 3 years older than me, and I'm admiring him. And he was one of the ones that me and him kind of started together. But at the end of the day, they all had hustle and grind in them, and I admired it. But I took something from it that day after we left the studio, and I was like, all right, enough's enough. I'm done asking people for stuff. I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do this right. And once I did that and put my mind to it, and I sat down and had a meeting with a couple close friends, I said, look, we ain't asking nobody for nothing no more, not until we have to. And that's what we did, and I think that even being disrespected by those executives that we ran into, we were at the point that we felt like we had to go that route and have that meeting with them. I mean, we were in discussions with a lot of different labels and at that time. So it was a lot of stuff going and a lot of moving parts and pieces and stuff. But we felt like we had to do that. And that's what we did. And like I said, it didn't work out for us in that meeting, but we learned a lot. But what I will say is that, once we started hustling, business cards, like I said, we had music everywhere and doing shows in Lawrence and signing autographs. That shows a lot, because then you start realizing, okay, that's when the light bulb come on. That's when it's like, now I get why those other artists were doing what they were doing. Now I get it. You know what I'm saying? Now I understand why they were doing what they were doing and why they're where they're at. Before it's like you see them and you see they CD come out and you see who's featured on it, and you're like, man, dang, how they get so-and-so on their song, and Mac Dre and E40, because back then Kansas City was known for Mac Dre coming to the town. And I remember somebody called me up, I think it was Squirrel Will or Scario Andretti, that called me up one day and said Mac Dre is doing verses for $200 at the studio right now. And back then I was like, you lying. But he was. I mean, he was at the studio for, I think he was down here for a weekend, and people just pull up and yeah, you get your verse and put it on your song. And that was before you had to have everybody in your video and all that stuff. It was just one of them. As long as you had him on the song and it was on the back of that CD, then yeah, it was gonna be sold. I mean, not Mac Dre, but Master P. Same way. Master P was in the city all the time. All the time. You catch him at the party house or anywhere. I mean, there's a lot of them that just would swing through, and you start making them connections. I remember we were hanging out with Looney Coleon and Killer Tay. Um, at the club, we had a good time that night, hung out, swapped numbers, networked, but that happened a lot. It happened all the time. So with that being said, like you start admiring people's grind and then you start seeing, oh, okay, now I know why they had them on the song and how they got that feature and stuff like that. And it just wasn't, it wasn't that big of a deal. But like I said, with these connections that we think we have to have, sometimes we just don't. And you just got to learn to grind on your own, and hopefully you can do it and be successful in it without even having to have those connections. There are certain things that we can do ourselves without getting any motivation from anybody else. I think the one thing that bothers me about the online part of life is that we get online, we get motivated by others. It's one thing to be motivated, and it's another thing to be inspired. You shouldn't let anybody motivate you. You should already be motivated. People can inspire you, and that's great. But an inspired person is a person that should already be motivated. When people are motivating you, it's because you wasn't motivated already. So like if you see videos with stuff, you should already be like, all right, It's just like now, I'm on this workout journey and healthy lifestyle journey, and it wasn't because I didn't want to lose weight 3 years ago. It was because I was trying to lose weight, but I wasn't all the way committed. And I'll admit that. I'll be the first person to admit it. Not being committed, yeah, it ain't gonna happen. Being committed, it'll happen. But it wasn't because somebody motivated me. I motivated myself. And that's how we have to be as people. Motivate yourself. You can be inspired by whoever and whatever, but you should have that motivation already, because the one thing that you'll learn, and the reason that I'm saying this, is that you don't just learn to be motivated. You got to have it already. Now you can talk yourself into doing it and pump yourself up to do it, but you got to have it. Nobody's going to teach you how to be motivated. Motivation should be already within you. Inspiration is different. You can be inspired by anybody, because there's a lot of people out here doing great things, but when it comes to that person motivated me, no, you should be motivating yourself. That person inspired you to do great things or whatever. But just know these connections, they ain't always what they seem to be. I'm gonna go back to it, and I didn't think I was gonna be on this long, but it just hit me, and it's funny how the smallest things will kind of tell you a story. Because like I said, it started off with my internet not working. I mean, it kept not working. Like I was on the phone with them, and I tried to reboot and reconnect, and just wouldn't. And I was like, eventually we came to agreement, like, what, we'll just do this another time. And that's fine. But, I ain't gonna take no more of y'all time up. But like I said, think about what I said and, tap in with me. I'm always here. Hit me up. You know where I'm at. You can Google me. Check out the new project, God and Light, produced by me, and where I look, and the whole Heaven Heathens crew. It's everywhere, but check it out. We here, just Google us. We everywhere, and we always been everywhere. So I'm gonna tap in with y'all later, man.